The stars had always been cold and silent. Admiral Park Do-hyun stood on the bridge of the battleship Iron Dawn, watching the endless darkness through the viewport. He was 63 years old, with gray hair cut short and a face marked by decades of military service. His eyes were tired but sharp, always watching, always waiting. For 30 years, he had guarded the Vega threshold. It was not a wall or a gate. It was simply a line drawn in space, an invisible boundary that marked where human territory ended. Beyond that line lay the Vordak Dominion, an empire older than human civilization itself. The Vordak had watched humanity grow. They had seen humans crawl out of their small blue planet, spread to the moon, then Mars, then to distant stars. The Vordak found it amusing. To them, humans were children playing in a garden, not knowing that wolves waited in the forest. Do-hyun checked the time. His daughter Yuna would be finishing her shift at Colony Meridian 7 right about now. She was a medical officer there, helping the families and workers who lived on that distant world. He had not seen her in 8 months. The distance between stars made family difficult. He thought about sending her a message. Just a simple hello, asking about her day, telling her he was proud of her. But he was tired, and there would be time tomorrow. There was always tomorrow. The alarm changed everything. It started as a soft beeping, then grew louder. Lieutenant Kang rushed to the sensor station, his young face going pale as he read the data. "Admiral," he said, his voice shaking. "We have a crossing. Vordak warship. No, wait. 12 warships. They have crossed the threshold." Do-hyun felt his blood turn cold. In 60 years, the Vordak had never crossed. They had watched, they had waited, but they had never stepped over that invisible line. Something had changed. "Where are they heading?" he asked. Kang looked at him with fear in his eyes. "Meridian 7, sir." The next 4 hours were the longest of Do-hyun's life. The Iron Dawn was fast, but the Vordak ships were faster. He pushed his engines beyond their limits, watching the distance between his fleet and the enemy grow smaller too slowly. Far too slowly. He tried to contact Meridian 7. The communication officer, a woman named Song Yoonji, worked desperately at her station. But there was only static. The Vordak had already cut the colony's signals. "Faster," Do-hyun ordered. "Push the engines harder." "Sir, if we push any harder, we risk. I do not care about risks. My daughter is on that colony. Push harder." They arrived too late. Where Meridian 7 once floated in orbit around a gas giant, there was now only debris. Millions of pieces of metal and stone drifted in the void, the remains of a world that had held 2.3 million human beings. The Vordak had not invaded. They had not conquered. They had simply erased the colony from existence. Do-hyun stood at the viewport, his hands pressed against the cold glass. His mind could not accept what his eyes were seeing. Somewhere in that field of debris was his daughter. His Yuna, the little girl who used to sit on his shoulders and point at the stars, asking him to name each one. "Sir," Yoonji said softly, "we are receiving a transmission from the Vordak fleet. Put it through." The main screen flickered and a Vordak appeared. The species was tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like wet stone and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on their flat faces. This one wore the markings of a high commander. "Human Admiral," the Vordak said. Its voice was like grinding rocks. "You have witnessed the power of the Dominion. Your colony existed on space we have claimed. It has been removed. Take this lesson back to your leaders. Withdraw your presence from this region, or more colonies will follow." Do-hyun said nothing. He simply stared at the alien face on the screen. "You do not respond," the Vordak continued. "Perhaps you do not understand. We have destroyed 17 civilizations. Your species is young and weak. You have no experience with true war. Accept your place, and we will allow you to survive in a smaller territory." Still, Do-hyun did not speak. His officers watched him, waiting. Some expected him to negotiate. Others expected him to rage. But the admiral did neither. He simply reached out and ended the transmission. For a long moment, there was silence on the bridge. Then Do-hyun turned to face his crew. His eyes were dry. His voice was calm. But something in his face had changed. Something human and warm had died, replaced by something cold and hard. "Send a message to Earth," he said. "Priority 1. Tell them what has happened here. Tell them 2.3 million of our people are dead. Tell them a Vordak commander just threatened to do the same to other colonies." He walked to his command chair and sat down slowly. "And send a message on all frequencies. Every channel. Over every language. I want the Vordak to hear it. I want every species in this galaxy to hear it." Yoonji's hands trembled as she prepared the transmission. "What message, sir?" Do-hyun looked out at the debris field one final time. Somewhere in that endless cloud of destruction, his daughter's body drifted alone in the cold. He would never hold her again. Never hear her laugh. Never tell her the things he had saved for tomorrow. There was no more tomorrow. Only today. Only now. Only what came next. "Tell them this," he said quietly. "You have made the last mistake your empire will ever make." The message went out across the stars. It reached Earth in hours. It reached Vordak space in days. It reached the far edges of the galaxy in weeks. And everywhere it went, beings of every species heard the cold promise in those words. Some laughed. The Vordak were ancient and powerful. What could humanity do against such an enemy? But others, the older races who had seen civilizations rise and fall, felt something different. They recognized the tone in that message. It was not anger. It was not grief. It was something far more dangerous. It was certainty. Admiral Park Do-hyun had made a promise to the galaxy. And humanity, as every species would soon learn, always kept its promises. The gathering storm, the United Assembly, had not seen a full gathering in over a century. The Great Hall on Earth, built beneath the mountains of old Switzerland, could hold 10,000 representatives from every human world. Today, every seat was filled. The air was thick with tension, grief, and something else. Something that smelled like the beginning of a storm. President Kim Sora walked to the central platform. She was a small woman, barely 1.5 meters tall, with a gentle face and soft voice. She had built her career on patience and diplomacy, on finding peaceful solutions to difficult problems. Many had called her weak for this. They said she was too soft for the harsh reality of space. Today, she would prove them wrong. 3 days ago, she began, her voice carrying through the silent hall. The Vordak Dominion crossed our boundary. They destroyed Colony Meridian 7. They killed 2.3 million of our people. Men, women, children, families, who wanted nothing more than to live their lives in peace. She paused, letting the weight of those numbers settle over the assembly. The Vordak commander sent us a message. He told us to accept our place. He told us that his empire had destroyed 17 civilizations before us. He told us we were young and weak. Sora's eyes moved across the crowd. She saw anger there. She saw fear. She saw the desperate hope that somehow there might be another way. "I have spent my life believing in peace," she continued. "I have always believed that war is the failure of wisdom, that there is always another path, another solution, another chance for understanding." Her voice hardened. "But there are some acts that cannot be answered with words. There are some crimes that demand more than diplomacy." The Vordak did not come to negotiate. They came to teach us fear. They believe we are like the others they have consumed. They believe our restraint is weakness. They believe our mercy is fear." She leaned forward, and her soft voice became steel. "They are wrong." The assembly erupted. Some shouted in agreement, others in fear of what was coming. Sora raised her hand, and slowly silence returned. "I am calling for a vote. For the first time in 300 years, I am asking this assembly to declare total war. Not limited conflict. Not border disputes. Total war until the threat is ended." The vote took less than an hour. It was unanimous. Far from Earth, in a military prison on a moon with no name, a man named Cho Minho sat in his cell. He was 38 years old, with a thin face and eyes that seemed to see through walls. Once, he had been the youngest commander in the fleet. A genius, they called him. A man who could see battles before they happened, who could find victory where others saw only defeat. Now he was a prisoner. His crime was simple. He had disobeyed orders. During a conflict 3 years ago, his superiors had told him to hold his position while civilians were evacuated. But the evacuation was too slow, and enemy forces were closing in. Minho had broken formation, attacked the enemy against orders, and saved 40,000 lives. The military court found him guilty of disobedience. He had accepted the sentence without complaint. Rules were rules, and he had broken them. But he had also saved those people, including his younger brother, who had been on one of the evacuation ships. Now his brother was dead. He had been stationed on Meridian-7. The cell door opened. A woman walked in, tall and straight-backed, with short gray hair and the uniform of a general. Her name was Han Ji-woo, and she commanded all ground forces in the Terran Collective. She was known for 2 things: her brilliant tactical mind and her complete lack of patience for anything she considered nonsense. "Cho Minho," she said, standing over him. "You look terrible." "Prison food," he replied. "It does things to a man. I heard about your brother. I am sorry." Minho said nothing. There was nothing to say. His brother was gone, along with millions of others, and all the words in the universe could not bring them back. "I am here to offer you a choice," Ji-woo continued. "You can stay in this cell and serve out your sentence. Or you can come with me and use that brain of yours for something useful. You want me to fight. I want you to think. The Vordak have been waging war for longer than humanity has existed. They know every strategy, every tactic, every trick in the book. We need someone who can write a new book." Minho looked up at her. "The assembly has voted for war?" "Unanimous. First time in 3 centuries. And you think I can help win it?" Ji-woo sat down across from him, her eyes hard and serious. "I think you are the most brilliant tactical mind we have. I think you see patterns others miss. And I think you have a very personal reason to want the Vordak to pay for what they did. Revenge is not strategy. No, but motivation is useful." She leaned forward. "The Vordak expect us to fight like every other species they have conquered. Fleet battles, orbital bombardments, direct confrontation. They have been doing this for thousands of years. They are very good at it, so we do something different." "Exactly. But what? That is the question I cannot answer. That is why I need you." Minho was silent for a long moment. He thought about his brother, about the colony that was now dust and debris, about the alien commander who had delivered his threat with such casual cruelty. He thought about the 17 civilizations the Vordak had destroyed before humanity, and he began to see something. A pattern, a weakness, a way forward that the Vordak would never expect. "You want me to win your war?" he asked. Ji-woo shook her head. "No, I want you to end theirs." A thin smile crossed Minho's face. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a man who had just found the answer to a very difficult problem. "Get me out of this cell," he said. "Get me access to every piece of information we have on the Vortic. Their economy, their supply lines, their infrastructure, everything. You have a plan?" "I have the beginning of one." He stood up, his eyes bright with terrible purpose. "The Vortic think they know what war looks like. They are about to learn that humans play by different rules." 3 days later, Cho Min-ho stood before the War Council. President Sora, General Ji-woo, Admiral Do-yoon, and a dozen other leaders watched as he presented his strategy. When he finished, there was silence. Then Admiral Do-hyun spoke. "This is not war," he said slowly. "This is something else entirely." "Yes," Min-ho agreed. "The Vortic wanted to teach us fear. We are going to teach them something far worse." "What?" Min-ho's smile returned, cold and sharp as a blade. "Consequences." The Vortic had prepared for war. They knew it was coming. After destroying Meridian 7, they had pulled their battle fleets into defensive positions, creating walls of warships around their most important worlds. Their commanders were experienced, their weapons were powerful, and their soldiers had been fighting for thousands of years. They were ready for humanity to attack, but the attack never came. Weeks passed, then months. The Vortic watched their sensors, waiting for the human fleet to appear. They expected massive battles, the clash of warships, the glory of conquest. This was how war worked. This was how it had always worked. In the shadows of space, far from the Vortic battle lines, a small ship drifted silently. It was painted black with no lights, no signals, nothing that could be detected by sensors. Its name was the Silent Fury, and its captain was a woman named Lee Hana. Hana was 34 years old, with sharp eyes and steady hands. She had commanded stealth operations for 10 years, slipping past enemy defenses, gathering information, and disappearing before anyone knew she was there. But she had never done anything like this before. "Status report," she said quietly. Her first officer, a young man named Yoon Tae-sun, checked his displays. "We are in position. 3 industrial moons ahead. No warships in the area. Only cargo vessels and worker transports. Security stations? Minimal. They have pulled most of their military forces to the front lines. These moons are considered safe." Hannah nodded slowly. This was exactly what Cho Min-ho had predicted. The Vortic were so focused on the expected human attack that they had left their back door wide open. "These moons," she said. "What do they produce?" "Engine components. Without them, Vortic warships cannot be repaired or built. And if these moons were destroyed?" Tae-sun understood what she was asking. Their entire war machine would begin to slow down. Within 6 months, their fleet would be operating at half capacity. Hannah looked at the 3 moons on her display. They were ugly things, covered in factories and mining equipment. Millions of Vortic workers lived there, producing the parts that kept their empire running. "Launch the strikes," she ordered. The Silent Fury carried no large weapons. It did not need them. Instead, it carried dozens of small, intelligent missiles that could navigate through any defense system. These missiles were not designed to explode. They were designed to burrow into the heart of a facility and release a special chemical compound that ate through metal like acid. The missiles launched in silence. They flew toward the 3 moons, invisible against the darkness of space. The Vortic sensors never detected them. 12 hours later, the industrial moons began to die. Factories collapsed. Mining equipment melted. Fuel stores caught fire. The Vortic workers fled in panic, cramming onto transport ships, watching as everything they had built fell apart. No one died. The missiles had been programmed to avoid living quarters. Cho Min-ho had been very specific about this. "We are not monsters," he had told the War Council. We will destroy their ability to wage war, but we will not become what they are. We will give them every chance to survive. And then we will watch as their empire crumbles around them. The destruction of the 3 moons was only the beginning. Over the following weeks, human stealth ships appeared throughout Vordak space. They struck at supply depots, destroying food and fuel. They attacked communication relays, cutting off distant colonies from the central government. They sabotaged power stations, plunging entire worlds into darkness. The Vordak military did not know how to respond. Their great battle fleet sat idle, waiting for an enemy that never appeared. Their commanders screamed for information, but information was becoming harder to find. Their communication networks were failing. Their supply lines were breaking. Their empire, which had stood for 10,000 years, was beginning to crack. Captain Lee Hana led 17 missions in 3 months. She became a ghost, a shadow that the Vordak could not catch. Her crew moved through enemy space like water through fingers, striking and vanishing before anyone could respond. One night, after destroying a major fuel depot, she gathered her crew in the ship's small common room. "I want you all to understand something," she said. "What we are doing is not glorious. There will be no songs about our battles, no statues in our honor. We are fighting a different kind of war." "Then why are we fighting it?" asked one of her younger officers. Hana thought about the question. She thought about Meridian 7, about the 2.3 million people who had been erased in an instant. She thought about the Vordak commander's casual threat, his absolute certainty that humanity would submit. "They wanted to see what humans do when we are angry," she said, finally. "Now they are finding out. We do not fight the way they expect. We do not play by their rules. We find the weak points and we press them until something breaks." She looked around at her crew, at the tired faces and determined eyes. The Vordak have conquered 17 civilizations. They think they know everything about war, but they have never fought a species like us. They have never fought a species that turns patience into a weapon, that makes silence into a blade. Far away, on the Vordak homeworld, the High Council was gathering in emergency session. Reports were flooding in from across the empire. Food shortages, fuel shortages, communication failures, production delays. The mighty Vordak war machine was grinding to a halt, and they could not understand why. "Where are the human fleets?" demanded one council member. "Why do they not face us in battle?" "They are cowards," spat another. "They hide in the shadows like prey animals." But the eldest member of the council, a Vordak who had lived for over 1,000 years, shook his great head slowly. "No," he said, his voice heavy with something that might have been fear. "They are not hiding. They are hunting. And we are the prey." The council fell silent. "We challenged a young species," the elder continued. "We killed their people and threatened their worlds. We expected them to respond with anger and foolishness, as all the others did. Instead, they responded with cold calculation. What do we do?" The elder looked at the reports scattered across the table. Everywhere he looked, he saw disaster. The empire was bleeding from 1,000 small wounds, and there was no enemy to strike back against. "I do not know," he admitted. "For the first time in my long life, I do not know." 6 months into the war, the Vordak Dominion began to starve. Not from lack of food, but from lack of everything else. Ships could not move because there was no fuel. Factories could not produce because there were no materials. Soldiers could not fight because there was no way to supply them. The great Vordak battle fleets, the pride of their empire, sat motionless in space. They were still powerful, still deadly. But power means nothing if you cannot reach your enemy. Humanity had not won a single battle. They had not needed to. They were winning the war. The cost of crossing 1 year into the war, the Vordak asked for peace. Their envoy arrived on a small diplomatic ship, white flags displayed on every surface. He was an old Vortic, tall and thin like all his kind, but bent with age and worry. His name was Vorth, and he had served the Dominion for 500 years. Admiral Park. Dohyun agreed to meet him on neutral ground, an abandoned space station at the edge of what had once been Vordak territory. Now it was just empty, like so many places in the crumbling empire. Dohyun walked through the rusted corridors alone. He did not bring guards or weapons. He did not need them. The Vordak were no longer a threat. Vorth waited in a large chamber, standing by a window that looked out at the stars. He turned when Dohyun entered, and the Admiral saw something in those 4 alien eyes that surprised him. Fear. Real, genuine fear. "Admiral Park," Vorth said, bowing his head slightly. "Thank you for meeting with me." "I did not come here to be thanked," Dohyun replied. "Say what you came to say." Vorth was silent for a moment, collecting his thoughts. Outside the window, a dead Vordak cruiser drifted past. It had run out of fuel 3 months ago and had been abandoned by its crew. "We wish to end this war," Vorth said finally. "The Dominion is prepared to make significant concessions." Concessions? "Yes, we will return all territory we have claimed in the past century. We will pay reparations for the destruction of Meridian 7. We will surrender the commanders who ordered the attack." Dohyun listened without expression. A year ago, such an offer would have been unthinkable. The Vordak had never surrendered territory to anyone. They had never admitted fault for any action. The fact that they were offering these things now showed just how desperate they had become. "Is that all?" Dohyun asked. Vorth seemed confused. "These are extraordinary concessions. No species has ever." I asked if that was all. The envoy spread his hands. "What more could you want?" Dohyun walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in a field of debris that had once been a colony, his daughter's body still drifted. He had thought about her every day for the past year. He would think about her every day for the rest of his life. "You misunderstand," he said quietly. "We are not interested in justice." "Then what are you interested in?" Dohyun turned to face the old Vordak. His eyes were empty, devoid of anger or hatred. There was only cold certainty. "Justice implies balance," he said. "A crime and a punishment that fits. An eye for an eye, as some ancient humans used to say. But there is no balance for 2.3 million lives. There is no punishment that fits the destruction of a world. Then, what do you want?" "Consequence." Vorth shook his head. "I do not understand. Your empire crossed the line. You killed our people and threatened to kill more. You expected us to submit, to accept our place, to be another footnote in your history of conquest. But humans do not submit. Humans do not forget. Humans do not forgive." Dohyun stepped closer to the envoy, and his voice dropped to barely a whisper. "We are going to take everything from you. Not because it is just. Not because it is fair. But because you need to understand that there are some lines you should never cross. Some species you should never threaten. Some prices that cannot be paid." He turned and walked toward the door. "Take our counteroffer back to your council. Unconditional surrender. Complete dissolution of your military. And you will live with the knowledge that your empire died because you made the mistake of hurting us." Vorth's voice cracked. "That is not an offer. That is extinction." Dohyun stopped at the door. "No. Extinction is what you did to Meridian 7. This is mercy. You will survive, but you will never threaten anyone again." The High Council received Vorth's report with disbelief. They rejected the human terms immediately. They still had their battle fleets, their soldiers, their ancient pride. They would not bow to a species that had existed for only a few thousand years. 3 weeks later, The lights went out on the Vortic homeworld. The operation was planned by Cho Min-ho and executed by a team led by engineer Beek Suji. She was 29 years old. Small and quiet, with hands that could fix or break any machine ever built. Her team of 12 specialists had trained for 6 months for this mission. They landed on the dark side of the homeworld, in a region covered by ancient forests. From there, they traveled underground, using old maintenance tunnels that had been forgotten for centuries. The Vortic had built their power grid thousands of years ago, when they were the only intelligent species in their region of space. They had never needed to protect it from attack. Suj, I found the central control hub after 3 days of careful movement. It was deep beneath the capital city, protected by thick walls and heavy doors. But walls and doors meant nothing to her team. They cut through them like paper. Inside the hub, Suji looked at the massive machines that provided power to a world of 12 billion Vortic. She felt no joy in what she was about to do. No satisfaction. Only the grim necessity of war. Set the charges, she ordered. Her team worked quickly and silently. They placed explosives at key points throughout the hub, enough to destroy the machines without bringing down the entire facility. What about the backup systems? One of her team asked. We hit those yesterday. And the emergency generators the day before that. Suji checked her timer. In 6 hours this world will have no power. No heat, no light, no communication. 12 billion Vortic. Yes, they will freeze. Winter is coming. Suji nodded slowly. Then they should surrender before it arrives. The team extracted without being detected. 6 hours later, exactly as planned, the power grid collapsed. Across the Vortic homeworld, lights flickered and died. Heating systems shut down. Communication networks went silent. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Vortic homeworld went dark. The High Council sat in their chamber, lit only by emergency candles. Outside, the temperature was already dropping. In the streets, Vortic citizens looked up at a sky they had never seen without the glow of city lights. Stars shone down on them, cold and indifferent. They were here, one council member whispered. On our homeworld, in our capital. And we never knew. The eldest member, who had warned them 6 months ago, spoke in a voice heavy with defeat. Contact the humans. Tell them we accept their terms. We cannot. Communications are down. Then find a way. Send a ship. Send a messenger. Send anything. He looked at the darkness pressing against the windows. Winter comes in 3 weeks. If we do not surrender before then, we will not survive to surrender at all. The other council members stared at him in horror. But no one argued. No one protested. The time for pride was over. The Vortic Dominion, which had ruled 1,000 stars for 10,000 years, had been brought to its knees. Not by fleets. Not by armies. Not by the traditional weapons of war. By patience. By precision. By the cold, methodical determination of a species that had been pushed too far. The humans had promised consequences. The Vortic were learning what that meant. The lesson that echoed the surrender ceremony took place exactly 1 year after the destruction of Meridian 7. This was not an accident. Cho Min-ho had planned it that way. He wanted the galaxy to remember the date, to connect the crime with its consequence, to understand that humanity measured time in terms of debts paid. The ceremony was held on a Vortic colony world, in a great hall that had once been used for victory celebrations. For thousands of years, Vortic commanders had stood in this hall and announced their conquests. Now the hall would witness something the Vortic had never experienced: defeat. Representatives from dozens of species filled the observation galleries. They had traveled great distances to see this moment. Some were old enemies of the Vortic. species that had suffered under Dominion aggression for centuries. Others were neutral observers, curious to see how the young human species would handle their victory. And some were potential rivals of humanity, watching carefully to learn what happened to those who challenged this strange new power. President Kim Sora walked to the central platform. She wore simple clothes, dark and undecorated, appropriate for a day that was about endings rather than celebrations. Her face was calm, but there was steel in her eyes. Behind her stood the leaders of the human war effort. Admiral Park Da-yoon, his gray hair now completely white, his face carved with lines of grief and exhaustion. General Han Ji-woo, straight-backed and silent, had duty nearly complete. Cho Min-ho, the architect of victory, watching everything with those calculating eyes. And Captain Lee Hana, who had led more missions into enemy territory than any other commander. She had lost 3 ships and 27 crew members over the course of the war. She had also destroyed more Vordak infrastructure than the rest of the fleet combined. Engineer Beek Suji was not present. She and her team were still on the Vordak homeworld, helping to restore power to essential systems. Even in victory, humans did not let their enemies freeze. The Vordak delegation approached the platform. There were 7 of them, the surviving members of the High Council. The eldest led them, walking slowly, his ancient body bent under the weight of defeat. He carried a ceremonial blade, the symbol of Vordak military authority. For 10,000 years, this blade had never been surrendered. It had been present at every victory, every conquest, every moment of Dominion triumph. Today, it would be given away. The elder stopped before President Sora and bowed his head. The watching representatives fell silent. Even those who had hated the Vordak for centuries held their breath. On behalf of the Vordak Dominion, the elder said, his voice echoing through the hall, I offer our unconditional surrender. Our fleets will be disbanded. Our weapons will be destroyed. We will never again threaten any species with military force. He held out the blade with trembling hands. Sora looked at the blade for a long moment. Then she shook her head. Keep it, she said. We did not fight this war for trophies. The elder blinked in confusion. Then, why? Sora turned to face the watching representatives. Her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the hall, to every recording device, to every ear listening across 1,000 worlds. We did not want this war, she began. Humanity has always believed in peace. We built our boundary in good faith, asking only to be left alone. We traded with those who wished to trade. We talked with those who wished to talk. We asked for nothing except the right to exist. Her eyes swept across the gallery, meeting the gazes of species she had never encountered. Civilizations she had only read about. The Vordak believed our restraint was weakness. They believed our mercy was fear. They believed that because we chose not to fight, we could not fight. She paused. They were wrong. The silence in the hall was absolute. Let this be the lesson, Sora continued. Humanity does not start wars, but we finish them. We do not threaten. We act. And when you harm our people, we do not stop until the harm is answered. She took a step forward, and her quiet voice somehow grew even more powerful. Not in equal measure, in full measure. We do not seek balance. We do not seek fairness. We seek consequence. Complete and absolute consequence, until those who harmed us understand that they should never have crossed our boundary. She turned back to the Vordak elder. Your empire will survive. Your people will live. But you will never again have the power to destroy another. Meridian 7. You will never again have the ability to threaten another species with extinction. This is not punishment. This is prevention. The elder lowered his head. We understand. I hope you do. I hope the entire galaxy does. Sora looked up at the observation galleries one final time. We are a young species. We have existed for only a moment compared to many of you. But we learn quickly, and we remember forever. She stepped back, and the ceremony continued with the formal signing of surrender documents. But everyone who was present, and everyone who watched the recordings later, remembered those words. Humanity does not start wars. But we finished them. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed. The Vortic Dominion became a peaceful federation. Their military might reduce to defensive forces only. Many of the species they had oppressed for centuries emerged from the shadows, finally free to grow and develop without fear. Other empires, ones that had been considering expansion into human space, quietly changed their plans. The lesson of the Vordak was too clear to ignore. The cost was too high to risk. Admiral Park Do-hyun retired from military service 6 months after the surrender. He returned to Earth and bought a small house by the ocean, where he spent his remaining years watching the waves and thinking about his daughter. He never found peace, not really. But he found a kind of quiet. Cho Minho was offered command of the entire fleet. He refused, choosing instead to teach at the military academy. He wanted the next generation to understand what he had learned, that the greatest weapon was not strength, but strategy. That the best war was the one your enemy could not fight. Captain Lehana continued to serve, but she was never the same. The war had taken something from her, some brightness in her eyes. She had done terrible things for the right reasons, and she would carry that weight forever. General Han Ji-woo became the head of defense planning, preparing for threats that might never come. She never relaxed, never assumed safety. She had seen too clearly how quickly peace could shatter. President Kim Sora served 3 more terms before retiring. In her final address, she returned to the themes of the surrender ceremony. We proved that we can be ruthless, she said. We proved that we can bring an empire to its knees. But our greatest strength is not our capacity for war. It is our capacity for restraint. We did not become monsters to defeat monsters. We remained human, even in our darkest hour. The galaxy listened. The galaxy learned. Centuries passed. Humanity continued to grow, spreading across the stars, meeting new species, building new relationships. They were known as traders, explorers, scientists, artists. They were known for their creativity, their curiosity, their strange habit of helping those in need. But they were also known for something else, a reputation that followed them wherever they went, a warning that every intelligent species learned eventually. Do not harm humanity. Do not threaten their people. Do not cross their boundaries, because they remember. And they repay. The Vortic Dominion had been the 18th civilization to challenge humanity. There was never a 19th.